Well, hello, lovely listeners and viewers. So today I have the wonderful, heroic, in my humble opinion, John O'Looney. John has been on podcasts and doing his own videos for the last 4 years, I think. I don't think it was prior to that. And I actually had a quick call with John when I first saw one of his videos, and I know John's spoken to a lot of people over the last 4 years. So, but I just said, any help and support I can give you, please just let me know. That was pretty much what I said. And so I'm super excited to have John on today because he's been an absolute legend
Mm.
in the truth movement, in the waking people up movement, in the saving humanity movement, and that all sounds big and grand, but it's exactly what John's been doing. So, John, welcome. I'm so stoked to have you today.
Oh, bless you. Do you know, it's really nothing mortifies me more than listening to people gush about how wonderful I am. Because I don't feel particularly wonderful, in honesty. And as I touched on with you just before you started recording, if I was to see a toddler in the road and I was walking down that road, there are three types of people, and there. Some people would walk past and ignore it. Other people would stop and get their phone out and film it, or another person would dart in the road. So for me, once I understood what was happening, it was never in any question that I wouldn't shout and holler about it because that's the kind of guy I am. And I think the mistake that I made was thinking that everyone was the same as me for the most part, and they're not. They're not. It is what it is. I don't think that I've done anything particularly special. And I'll meet my maker with a clean conscience. What's the worst that can happen? They bump me off and I'll be free.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really don't care. They can come and get me tomorrow. I invite them to come and do it. And then you'll martyr me, and then see what happens. I keep shouting about what's going on, and now I'm finding probably 50% of the deceased we have in our care have got these white fibrous clots in them now. So it's exactly what I said it was. This is as the cancer and the heart attacks and the strokes go through the roof. I've spoken to a doctor. A doctor's receptionist and a nurse today alone. Who, I've been swamped with phone calls. And when I first spoke out 3.5, 4 years ago, nearly now, it was from a very lonely place. But now I draw comfort that I'm not alone and people see it now. But unfortunately, for many of them, it's going to be too late.
Yeah. So John, I'd love to know, and the viewers and listeners, just a bit of a backstory about you. Obviously, you're a funeral director. I don't know whether you've always been a funeral director or whatever, but
No.
give us a bit of background, and also, what was your sort of epiphany, your wake up moment? What
Yeah.
sort of sprung?
So I've never really been a conspiracy theorist, I suppose. I was always a bit of a black sheep growing up. I was always school bored me. I felt it was more of a social event than actually learning anything. I was very bored. The programming didn't resonate with me, I guess. And I was an engineer. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. My dad said to me, "What are you doing? What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Right, you're working with your Uncle Frank on Monday," and that was on a Friday. On Monday, I was in the garage doing panel beating. So I was a panel beater for a couple of years. That particular garage went pop. Hopefully not due to my poor panel beating, but I kind of carried on in the same vein and went into engineering, and I was a maintenance engineer. And what it does, when you repair things for a living, it engages your brain to have a critically thinking mind. I would look at a machine that was broken. I would look at the one next to it that was working, and you kind of look, and your mind is engaged in, well, that does that. Why isn't that doing that? And I've got the ability to think critically. And I guess that helped in me seeing through the lie that was COVID. The first thing I would say I've been a funeral director. Most people will probably know anyway, but I've been a funeral director for 18 years. 10 years was spent working for the co-op, and the last 8 years I've been running my own funeral home here in Milton Keynes. And in order to find me, just type in the letters MK for Milton Keynes and then FFS, Family Funeral Services. If you do MKFFS, you'll find me. And, I would hasten to add, anyone can reach out to me at any time to verify who I am, because that's incredibly important, that I'm not just an internet keyboard warrior activist, and I really am a funeral director. And I've been very keen to identify myself to strengthen what I've said in the hope that people will save someone somewhere. So in 2020, the news broke, and this was I actually learnt about COVID in the end of November, beginning of December of 2019, and I had a family come to me, and I've told this story before, so I'll skim over it. But they lost a loved one in Northampton Hospital up the road, and they complained that the hospital wouldn't let them see their loved one. So I said, "Don't worry, I'll go and pick them up, and you can see them at the funeral home." And whilst I was there collecting this deceased, it was a lady, bless her. She I kind of asked them, I said, why won't you let them see their loved one? Because they have a chapel arrest in every mortuary. And the idea is people die up on the wards, the porters take them down, and then loved ones spend time with them in the chapel of rest, like viewing room, that's right next door to the mortuary. And if you're wondering where that is in a hospital, you drive onto any hospital site and you look around you, you see a big tall chimney somewhere. There's one on every site, and that's the incinerator. And the incinerator is always next door to the mortuary, because that's where the clinical waste goes. For example, if you have an RTA or an accident and you lose a limb, you don't have a funeral for a limb. It goes into incineration. And yeah. So people don't think of that though today.
No,
You
no.
only ever go to hospital to get better, but unfortunately, more now than ever, a lot of people are going in there to die or being killed off. So I picked up this person, asked them why they wouldn't let them view, and they said they didn't say anything. You just opened the door, and there was a pandemic tent in there, an inflatable mortuary racking system that they use predominantly on aircraft sites, for example. So if they have a plane go into a mountain in the Andes, the recovery rescue teams can't transport a mortuary there. They do it with these inflatable mobile units, and this was in this particular viewing room. So I said, well, I looked around and the fridge behind me isn't full. What's that for? The overflow. And they kind of said, we've been told something horrible is going to come, and we're preparing for it. And he didn't say the words COVID, but that's what he said. And anyway, I left, and my deceased wasn't in that sectioned off area, thankfully. And I took that deceased home, and I rung my mum that night, I rung my brother and said, listen, I've been told there's something horrible coming. I told him what I didn't know. What do you do? Do you stock up on food? Do you lock your doors? I really didn't know. Then in January, the news broke, and they showed us pictures of people falling over in China and, just dying in the streets. And I was really worried. As a funeral director, I'm an ex-smoker. I'm probably a couple of stone too heavy. I've got a bit of asthma. I was really worried. Why would you not be? Here's a thing we're told attacks the lungs, and Boris Johnson said it's going to kill someone in everyone's family, and so on and so forth. And there was a big media effort made, weren't there? And but I wasn't seeing the numbers coming through. We were going to hospital and we were picking up people in sealed body bags, and I was saying, "Oh, these are COVID." And I remember seeing them half filled with fluid, and thinking, "That's really what is this COVID must be doing a terrible thing if it's doing that." But I was getting people coming to me begging me to see their mums and dads who they'd been told had died from COVID, and I'm too soft, I suppose. I care too much, and I kind of I gave them the time that they needed. So I was taking the people out of the body bags I was told had died from COVID, and washing them and dressing them, embalming them, laying them out. My embalmer was happy to embalm them, and we were presenting these people for people to view. And I never wore a mask because you can't work in a mask, you can't breathe.
Mm.
So I was waking up every day waiting to get sick or die or whatever, and it never happened. And then I took a phone call in about March from a guy called John. He was from a company, he said, called Pandemic Resilience. And he said it was a government sponsored company. And his job was to call all of the funeral directors in on his list. So I assume he had a list of funeral directors. And every Monday, he said he would call me, and he was collating the numbers for the pandemic effort. And I was happy to give him that information. Why would you not? I still believed in COVID. And he would ask me how many I could take as a funeral home, what my capacity to hub deceased was, how many I'd picked up that week, where from, and how many were COVID. So this was at a time when the doctors had all took a step back, and we were told that was to protect us, protect the NHS, and all the crap we now know is crap.
Yeah.
And they were sitting at home and they weren't attending deaths. Usually, when someone dies, a doctor would be in attendance to certify death. So we were instructed by Thames Valley Police to declare death, which is different from to certify death. But we would then, or the care home would talk to the doctors over the phone, and they would give the okay for us to attend, and we would attend. And because the doctors weren't attending, and because I knew this guy would ring up every Monday, and I still got his mobile number on my phone. I was asking lots of questions to get the information to relay it to him on the Monday, and I was writing it all down, and because I wanted to give him the proper info, because there's no point in doing it all if you're not going to collate the information properly. So I would tell him, and I said, and almost straight away he started steering me in the direction of COVID. And I'll give an example. I picked up a guy from a care home. It was a 85 bed facility, Kent Seal Care Home here in Milton Keynes, and I'd spoke to the staff at the point of collection. It was a gentleman. He died. He'd been there 5 years. He had onset dementia. There was no doctor present. There was no COVID test done. I spoke to his family here in the funeral home at the time of arrangement, and they confirmed he'd been there 5 years. He had onset dementia. He didn't have COVID. And I would tell him that, and straight away he said, I've got to put him down as COVID, John. And I was like, well, why? Why would you do that when I've told you, what's the point in you doing this if you're not going to write down the truth? And the cracks started showing, and he openly admitted to me. He said, "I've been told I have to put everyone in that care home down as COVID." I said, "But why, John?" I said, "He wasn't COVID." He said that one resident in this 85-bed facility had tested positive and had gone on to die in a care home. Well, of course they die in a care home. That's what happens. But they've been instructed from that date, everyone that passes is to be a COVID death. And they were paid big money. The care homes were paid big money for putting it down as a COVID death. So that's what happened. And that went on throughout 2020. There were no more deaths than usual. In fact, 2019 was slightly busier. But it is what it is. And then the October came, 2020, before they rolled out the jabs. And this guy, John, rang me up and he said, I don't know why I'm doing this job. He said, everyone is saying the same thing. And by everyone, he meant all of the funeral directors. There are no COVID deaths. There were no COVID deaths. They were just writing them down. And they were bumping them off in the hospitals, giving them a positive COVID test and then ventilating them and putting them on palliative care. It's unbelievable, and people weren't allowed to go in because it's too dangerous. So there were no witnesses to these poor people's plight. And that's what happened throughout 2020. And it became very apparent to me. I certainly knew they rolled the jabs out. They touted these new wonder jabs they developed in record time, warp speed, I think Trump called it. And I said, you wait till they put needles in arms. I said, people will die. And they all laughed at me. And lo and behold, they rolled them out here, January the 6th locally, and people fell over like dominoes. The phone was ringing off the hook. And the second thing that I saw that really woke me up was me predicting that. And then the mistake they made when they rolled out these jabs, well, the reason that I sussed them out was the ages. So they initially said, didn't they? Oh, only the most vulnerable, only the over 70s, or only the over 60s, or, well, if you're 50 and you've got an ongoing condition or high blood pressure, well, perhaps the 40s. Well, if you're a 30-year-old parent, and as they went down the age groups over the months, it was them people that were dying specifically in numbers that I'd never seen before. I mean, to give you an idea, when I worked for the car, I worked for a funeral home on the Barrett Road in Northampton. It was a busy hub. Busy is a relative term, isn't it? Depending on how staff you've got. But we were doing about 800 funerals a year. To give you an idea, I do about 150 funerals a year here. So certainly 6-8 times the volume of funerals that I'm doing. And in that time, those 800, I would count the number of people under 40 would be no more than 5 in a 12-month period. And it would always be a very rare cancer, a road traffic accident, a suicide, or something like that. There would be a specific reason, especially with young men. It was usually suicide or road traffic accident because they all drive like nutters, young lads, don't they? I've been young to know, and I've seen that here as a small funeral director in some months, and every one of them has been COVID vaccinated. Every one of them. How do I know? I asked the family at the point of arrangement. And because the government made such a fuss about people getting vaccinated, there were only two forthcoming to get. They'll go, oh yeah, Dad, I was vaccinated, fully protected. Some of them are blissfully unaware. Some of them are very aware, and there's nowhere to tell them to go. I mean, the first guy I found the clots in was in 2021, about halfway through 2021. It was a 30-year-old boy who died. And I mean, no disrespect to him, but I'm 56. He was 30. He's a boy. And when you're 56, but he was a young man of 30, and he died suddenly. And we opened him up. Now there are two types of embalmings that we do, and I have more or less 100% embalm rate here. I include it in the price, so people haven't got to pay extra for it. And it's let's be honest, funeral directing is a service to the living, not those that are passed.
Yeah.
So I want people presented as good as it can possibly be, and there's a reason for that. When my dad was 57, he died from motor neurone disease. It was a 5-year thing. It was awful, and I could feel my throat tightening. And when I went into the funeral director, and I was an engineer at the time, before he died, they'd asked to keep his brain. And my dad, he kind of said, "Yeah, do it. It's only dead meat, and it might help someone else." I'm sorry.
That's all right, John.
And the way they remove the brain to retain it is they cut along the back of the hairline, they pull the skin over, they then run a saw around the head, and they put a notch, a little V in the back. And the idea of that is so that you can line it back up perfectly when you put the cap back on. And then they pull the skin over and they stitch it up, and no one is any of the wiser. And your brain is very soft and it leaks a lot. So when they do a post-mortem, they generally put the brain back in with the organs. So that's why people who have had a post-mortem, a full post-mortem, are always slightly distended. And they never fitted his head properly. So when I went in the chapel of rest, he had a big ridge there and a bruise there. They hadn't even put any makeup on, and I remember being absolutely horrified and always resolved to do better for people. So that's what I do. I try to present people as well as I possibly can. So inevitably I get to see the inside of a lot of people is the point that I'm trying to make. And I can see these thick white fibrous clots inside people. Now, there are two types of deceased. There's an expected death and there's a sudden death. Expected death is if you're terminally ill. A sudden death is if I get run over by a bus or a car accident or a motorbike accident, etc., etc. Now, they do a post-mortem. And what do they do with a post-mortem? Sometimes they take the brain out and described as I've done earlier. Other times it's just the organs, and they'll cut up the middle, take the sternum out, take the organs out one by one, take blocks and slides, and then they will put those back in a bag, and the bag goes back in. So clearly the circulatory system has been chopped about. Now, when I'm doing a non-embalmed person, I make an incision into the carotid artery, and we use that to pump fluid all around the body. Now, that's with what we call a straight case, someone that hasn't been embalmed, because they're all in one piece, they're intact. Now, with a post-mortem case, clearly they've been compromised. Every organ has a vein and arteries going in and out to feed it oxygen that it needs to survive. And they cut them when they take them out. So if I was to make that incision and pump the fluid around, it would leak out everywhere, So you can't do it like that. You have to open them up, take the bag of organs out, and then manually target each artery. And you've got like radial arteries that go down the legs. So if you target each artery, the fluid goes down the leg to the toes, and the fluid is pink in color, embalming fluid. So you can see the fluid going down the limb. And when the toes go pink, you've got a good amount of fluid in them, and they're properly embalmed. Now, when we've emptied this guy's cavity to have a look at him and to go into his ephemeral arteries, they're blocked. And there's like a fatty white substance in them. So my embalmer has picked the end of this clot out to pull it out, or this obstruction, and it's kept coming. It's come out in one piece, the entire length of his leg. And that was how we first discovered these clots. And I'd heard a guy from Alabama, a very decent, lovely guy called Richard Hirschman. And he's an Alabama-based embalmer, and he talked extensively about this. But you have to wait. I don't work on an industrial scale, so I had to wait for the planets to align. I had to wait for a youngster to come in that I suspected was a vaccine death, and then a family to want embalming, and then, a post-mortem case where they've been opened up. But I found it in this guy. So I wrote to my local coroner and took pictures and documented it and kept a sample and said, look, I found this in this guy. He came from you, so I know you've seen it as well. What is it? We've never seen anything like it. And I've been doing this, I've said 18 years. And I've got a BIE registered embalmer who's done 25 years. So 25 years, he's been pulling people apart and putting them back together again, embalming them, and he's never seen it. The coroner didn't respond to the email. I kind of knew what was going on then, that's why I sent an email because I wanted a paper trail. But they wouldn't respond to the email. I got a phone call from one of the girls in the office about 4 days later. And she said, I've spoke to the pathologist. She said it's perfectly normal, and it grows post-mortem. Now I worked for the coroner for 7 years, so I know it's not normal because my job was to pick up bodies. And I was picking up bits out the road. And if that was normal, I would have seen it before. I've been present at probably 1,000 embalmings over the years, at least 1,000. So I know what the inside of someone looks like and what it should look like. I might not know the Latin name for every nerve and fiber, but I can point out the organs and the bits and the vessels and, the radials are in the arm and the ephemerals down the legs. And I know, I'm not stupid. I know what an aorta looks like. I've seen more hearts than any man in general practice, and perhaps even some surgeons, so because I take a real interest in what I do. So I was always fascinated,
Yeah.
and that was that. So I didn't get anywhere there. So I wrote to the coroner, the chief coroner of England, because that's his boss. Didn't get a reply. I then emailed him again and CC'd in about 20 doctors and scientists that were on the same page as me. And got a very short paragraph reply that basically said, we follow government policy. Didn't deny it. Didn't admit anything, but said we have to follow government policy. So when you die from thrombosis, it's a blockage. It's a generalized term for a blockage. It could be a garden pea. It could be a white fibrous clot. It could be a traditional clot. It doesn't matter. It's a blockage. It's a thrombosis, a thrombolytic embolism, So that's all they're bound under government policy to declare. They won't go into what it's made of or why it's appeared because that is government policy. And that was the end of it, Yeah, so I know what's going on. And
John,
then in
John, can I
September,
ask? Can
yeah,
I
go
ask?
on.
Sorry, you mentioned a while ago that you knew that the vaccines, you were going to start to see a rise in deaths.
Yes,
And you said you never did conspiracy theory. So
yeah.
did you just think, well, these vaccines that they've been rushed out, they're going to be a travesty, or had you seen something
No,
before that?
I knew it was a deliberate act. And the reason for that, I received a phone call. I've been very vocal, and I received a phone call in September of 2021. It was from a guy called Mark Sexton. Now he's a retired police constable. Many of you will know him, and it
Yeah,
invited me to attend a meeting in Westminster that he was chairing, and it was going to be attended by a very senior government minister. His name was Sir Graham Brady. It was in Birdcage Walk, number 1 Birdcage Walk, boardroom 1. I went there. We sat down, and there were about 18 of us present, about 12, maybe 10 or 12 at the table, and half a dozen on Zoom panel at the end of the table, kind of attending virtually. Amongst those were Professor Dolores Cahill, Dr. Tess Laurie, Dr. Sukarit Bhakdi was at the end, Anna Debisseray, the lawyer, sat next to me. Philip Hyland was opposite, a barrister, Francis Hoare. Dr. Stephen Frost was there, Dr. Sam White, and others. My apologies if I can't recollect them all, but Sir Graham Brady came in. Sir Graham was the commissioner of something called the 1922 Committee. Now you can Google his name, Google who he is. He's since been promoted to King's Privy Council, so clearly crime does pay, But he, at the time, he was what's called the Commission of the 1922 Committee. Now, I wasn't familiar with politics. I was just a funeral director, but he is basically the commissioner of a commission, which is a group of guys who hire and fire up prime ministers. So he's a pay grade above the prime minister, which I wasn't aware there was, but he is.
right.
So he hired and fired Boris and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. I think they knew when it's time to go, and he would have selected Keir Starmer, or he'd been involved in that, or whoever is commissioner now. So there is no one more senior than him. And I kind of went to the meeting the same as all the others, blissfully unaware of Agenda 2030 and that kind of thing. I wasn't aware of any of that. And we basically had 5-10 minutes to talk. So Graham sat there. I was the first one to speak, and I thought about what I was going to say and condensed it all down into a 5-minute thing because we was impressed upon us before we attended the importance, how important a minister's time is. You can't take up too much of their time. So I'd condensed it and said what I had to say. And then I listened as it went round the table, and I listened in disbelief. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people were saying that vaccine recipients said they had an active ingredient they had between 2 and 5 years post-vaccine. They went into the mechanisms of how they were going to die, the blood clots, the heart attacks, the cancers, and reams of evidence were given to Sir Graham. Now, as I listened, I wasn't usually when you sit around a table and people are speaking, you always look at the person who's addressing you. I watched Sir Graham because me looking at his body language was quite a telling thing, and he was ashen faced. He knew all about it. We went there thinking, oh, at last someone's listening. And the reality is he went there to find out what we knew and report
Right.
back.
Yeah.
And he was probably more forthcoming than he should have been. And he said to us, he openly admitted it was above his pay grade, way above his pay grade. So a couple of levels, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He said he would try. He said, but he couldn't promise anything. And of course, nothing's happened as it has been done. And we all sat there in disbelief. A couple of the girls started crying because we realized it was a real Agenda 2030 was real. Really was a depopulation agenda. And it was put to him before he left that when people find out, there'll be civil war. When people find out their families have been killed off and their kids sterilized without any consent or consultation or informed consent, there'll be civil war. And he agreed. And he said they know and they're preparing. And that's what the big prisons are for. And that's what the young men of fighting age are being imported here for, is to prevent that civil unrest and to quash it when it emerges, as I suspect it will.
Could yeah, unbelievable. Could you just put your mic closer to your mouth? You hit it when you. That's it. Cool. Wow. And that was 2021.
Yeah, that was 2021 September. So I knew then that it was a deliberate act. I knew it was deliberate, and I've known ever since. And I think one of the side effects of coming out and speaking openly and putting your soul on the line. And I think people know they watch me. Now, I've often wondered, why do people gravitate to me? I'm not selling any books.
No.
I don't get paid to talk. I don't ask for speakers' fees and all that bollocks. And why is it they gravitate to me? I think because it's undeniable that I'm on the coal face and I see what's happening. I think people also see sincerity.
Yeah.
They know that I'm an honest guy. And I say it as I see it. Whether you like what I've got to say or not, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't lie. And what have I got to gain? As a man running a successful funeral home, one of the reasons I was an engineer and I got laid off and I thought, what else can I do? I was struggling to get back in at the same level electrically. So I thought I'd retrain as being a funeral director for a number of reasons. One is I didn't like being stuck in a factory. I got bored easy. Same as I did sitting there at school, bored. Because I was very clever, I was very bright. And so I wanted to do something where I was out and about, and that ticked the box for this. Number two, I wanted to do something that was worthwhile. Now, you're never going to, people of a certain age will probably understand it more. When you've lost people that you love, the lowest point in your life is when you lose someone you love. So to be able to help someone through that process, it really is, there's no greater honor in the same way as nursing would feel. Or the same way as doctors used to feel, or some doctors feel, not all of them now, clearly. But I consider it a great honour. And the older you get, the more you realise it's better to give than to receive. And you understand the true meaning of that. I don't mean dipping my hand in my pocket and giving someone 50 quid. Just giving them care, or your time, or a hug, or words that you know will help them. And providing them a service. So that ticked a box for me. And then, of course, the last one was never wanting to be laid off again.
Mm.
And there's nothing more certain than death, especially now under these communist nutters. Yeah, so this is why I kind of chose to be a funeral director, and I wouldn't want to do anything else really. I'm quite, certainly I can't. I mean, there was a time when I would imagined being a doctor must be wonderful. Not anymore.
No.
I can remember thinking when I first started funeral directing, what wonderful, caring people doctors and vicars must be, and they are amongst the most heinous, and in the very same way as paedophiles target positions that they have access to children, nursery nurses, that kind of thing. Doctors have God complexes, and that's what they do. And I mean, I put out an appeal some time ago, and I've had over 120 nurses probably now contact me to agree with what I've said. Most of them have left nursing because they can't bring themselves to do that to people.
No.
So who does that then leave in the hospitals? The psychopaths, the
Yeah.
agency nurses from Africa who
Yeah.
don't care. They just do what they're told to do. They're on 10 times the money. They're tiptoeing around giving the injections and not even questioning it, and they're not going to, because there's a cultural disassociation there. And historically, if you look over time at all the great slaughters, if you want to kill white people, you put black soldiers in. If you want to kill black people, you put white soldiers in. That's what these governments have always done, and this is no exception. And I know what's going on in these hospitals. I know what is going on. Remdesivir, that was one of the primary antivirals, or the only antiviral treatment they would allow hospitals to give people they said had COVID, people with breathing difficulties. Now, if you guys Google, 1 second, I'll return the call. If you Google, it'll do 2 rings. If you Google side effects of remdesivir, what are the side effects of it? Breathing difficulty, trouble breathing, wheeziness, tight chest. They're not conducive to recovery of a respiratory patient. It will kill you.
Yeah.
They know this. So these nurses, once they start seeing the outcomes of people who were asymptomatic but ill, does it sound familiar? How can you, if you're ill, you're ill. You are suffering, but they were PCR testing people, telling them they're ill. And I've since discovered that HIV was actually a precursor, one of the practice runs. So if you cast your mind back to HIV, you can be really seriously ill without knowing you're ill. You're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And they start giving you the medicine to help you. And then suddenly you get debilitating, wasting disease and sickness. And it's the medicine, the AZT. It's well documented. That's what killed Freddie Mercury. Was not AIDS. It was the treatment, and they killed him because he was such a high-profile person. They knew it would encourage people to come get the vaccines, and it's sickening, absolutely sickening. And it's a double-edged sword, because once the veil is lifted, and you see through the veil, there's no going back. And I don't know, sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse.
Oh my God, don't I know it? It's so hard. I mean, most people that, see the world like you do and like I do, and it's like, well, you can't go back anyway.
No, no,
and
no.
you wouldn't want to,
No,
but
I wouldn't want to. But
at
I
the
just,
same time, it's lonely, isn't it?
yeah, of course it is. I remember listening to my granddad talking about being a prisoner in World War II. The Japanese captured him in Singapore, and the horrors that he talked about, and he told me in great detail, and thinking, well, what a boring life I've had. This is we're unlucky at the same time. You wouldn't want to live through something like that,
No. Yeah.
But nothing significant has ever happened really, and here we are. This is a biblical global crime now, and what a story to tell our grandchildren this will be.
Well,
is the hope.
Let's hope we have grandchildren. You might already, but I don't.
No, I was a late starter. My boy was an IVF baby. I was 42 when we had him.
Oh.
My missus had trouble conceiving, so he was about 10 or 11 when COVID was rolled out. 10, and I remember being very frightened that the school would vaccinate him without my consent. And I rang when he started the secondary school. I rang them up, and they said, "Oh, email across." So I emailed them and I said, look, as a funeral director, I'm seeing lots of vaccinated people dying. I know you have an immunisation nurse and an immunisation policy. You don't touch my son. This is me withdrawing my consent and giving you written notice, and I will hold you accountable. So they wouldn't reply to the email, because these people never do, because they know it's a paper trail. But they rang me up, and about 4 or 5 days later, I had a phone call from a girl called what was her name? Sarah. She said, "Hi, my name's Sarah, and I'll tell you the school. It's Hazley School in Milton Keynes, and anyone can ring them and check." She said, "My name's Sarah. I'm the immunisation nurse at Hazley." So I said, "Oh, hi, Sarah." So I went on to tell her I was a funeral director and I'm seeing all these people die from COVID. And I thought she'd think I was a nutter because everybody did. Nobody listened to me, you know. Nobody listened to a man who puts people in coffins for a living about who's dying. You know, it's
I know,
okay.
I know.
And I thought she'd be shocked and horrified and humour me or whatever. She openly admitted it. She said, "Yes, I know the risks." I said, "Okay." I said, "Have you got children, Sarah?" She said, "Yes, I've got two. One was 10 and one was 8." I said, "Would you vaccinate them?" She went, "Oh, no." I said, "Okay." I said, "But you vaccinate mine." "Well, I have to. It's my job." Yeah, nutter, absolute sadistic nutter. And this is Sarah from Hazley School in Milton Keynes, openly admitted it. Yeah, there you go. That's kind of where we are. These people, I think we're going to see a similar thing to what we saw in Nuremberg when we got good people doing terrible things because they're doing what they're told to do or what they're paid to do.
Yeah,
You know, you know, history always repeats itself, and I can tell you now, there's going to be no defense because when people find out they've lost loved ones, and you knew, they'll be hanging them from lampposts, and I won't be getting involved. I'll be, you carry on, mate. You've made your bed. You know, and I generally believe that will happen, unless, of course, they deploy young men of fighting age, a standing army that Starmer's talked about, that
yeah,
he's already imported.
yeah. That you know, I've tried to say this to people, and they're like, "No, you know," and it's like
They won't see it until it's
no.
deployed, and even then they'll say, "Oh, but they're trying to help us."
But it's like the asylum seekers versus the illegal immigrants. You know, that they're two very different things.
Yeah, of
And
course. The reason why these asylum seekers, why these illegal immigrants choose to come in via rubber boats, it's a simple reason. They're considered lost at sea legally when they're in these little boats. So international maritime law dictates that you have to rescue someone who is lost at sea and take them to the nearest land, and that's what they do. That's why they're not coming in on the back of lorries anymore, or on the train, or on the ferry sneaking in. They come in on rubber boats because they're obliged under international law to take them in because they're lost at sea.
right,
And people don't understand.
yeah, that's
It
how
is what it is.
that's how they're getting away with it. I interrupted you. You'd spoken about the big meeting with the guy that
Yes.
was above the prime minister.
Yeah.
So, and you were like, "What the actual hell?"
Yeah.
So then, what happened after that? Can you remember?
Well, I talked about it extensively. So about halfway through the meeting, Dr. Stephen Frost was recording the meeting, and there was a barrister there called Francis Hoare who stopped everything and he said, "Hold on, Sir Graham, this meeting's being recorded." And he said, "We're here under Chatham House rules." And I didn't understand what Chatham House rules was. I'd not been told about it, and I never attended the meeting on that basis. Now, Chatham House rules basically enables you to have the ability to criminally conspire, and under an elite gentleman's agreement, nothing leaves that room ever, and you can never be held accountable for what's said. So
Yeah,
that's what Chatham House rules is. Yeah, it's just bollocks. Now, to my mind, and I've said before, you know, that's all right if you're forging foreign policy or a business deal or something that requires an element of secrecy. But when you're talking about the murder of women and children and innocent people with a bioweapon, I'm not Chatham House rules. That doesn't apply to me and my moral compass. Sorry. So I started speaking about it very openly to anyone that would listen. Because I know the idea is just to get one more person and they'll tell someone else and then, you know, to use the grapevine, albeit via the digital internet. And I took a phone call from a guy who didn't identify himself. He was an older gentleman and he said that he was from British intelligence. Now, he was very well spoken. I don't want to say too much about him, but he didn't leave his contact details, obviously. And he said to me, "You're right in everything you've said." He said, "And you are a person of interest. They are going to target you." And literally 3 weeks from that phone call, I suddenly became really breathless. So an ambulance was called and I went to hospital. They took me into triage. This was at a time when they were saying, "Stay away from the hospitals. They're overrun." There was no one in there. It was empty. I was the only person in triage. and seen immediately as a direct result. They want to do a PCR test, and I told them no. They want to do a lateral flow, and I said, you're not sticking it up my nose. I said, I'll spit on the stick. And that's what I did. She put 3 into this machine they have for lateral flows. She said, you haven't got COVID. And I said, I know I haven't. I said, I think I've been poisoned or burnt, because that's what it felt like. As an ex-smoker, I've had many a chest infection, and that was one of the reasons I packed up when I became a funeral director, because I was trying for having my boy, and I also was washing and dressing people with nicotine on their fingers and a patch on who clearly died from smoking. So that was why I packed up. But I knew what a chest infection felt like, and I felt like I'd been burnt or poisoned. And I said this, and she said, well, we're going to put you on a COVID ward anyway. And then I knew what was going to happen. What they wanted was a death of a prominent anti-vaxxer from COVID. So I went in there. This was early hours of the morning, and I was on 7 or 8 liters of oxygen. And I was in a COVID ward with 3 other guys. It was a 4-bed room at Milton Keynes Hospital. In the morning, at 9 o'clock, a consultant came round. He sat on the bed and he said to me, I'm here to save your life from COVID. I was like, okay. I said, have you looked at my notes? I said, because I haven't got COVID. I've had 3 of your tests. I said, these are the tests that you're putting people on palliative care on the basis of. And he said, oh, we just want to be sure. And I said, okay. I said, well, you tell me how we're going to be sure to save me from COVID that I haven't got. How are we going to be sure then? What are you going to give me to be sure? He said, I want to start you on remdesivir. And I was like,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Well, I said to him, you've got no chance. And he said, well, why? And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, you tell me the clinical benefits to me as a respiratory patient. Well, I look up side effects of remdesivir. Wheeziness, tight chest, difficulty breathing, kidney function, liver function. And do you know what he did? He just got up and walked away. He didn't even engage with me because he knew that I was right and he had no defense. I'd have made him look stupid. Yeah. And these people are not used to someone sitting there knowing what they're talking about. And I'd shamed him because I'd shamed him by openly exposing he was trying to give me a drug that would kill me. So anyway, about 3 or 4 hours later, I had a very gaunt woman come over the bed. She was really nervous. Her hands were shaking. And she was about late 30s, maybe. And she was looking at the floor and the ceiling. She couldn't look me in the face. And she sat down and she said, I'm here to save your life from COVID.
Oh, for God's sake.
The exact same line, word for word, like it's come from a book of coercement,
Wow.
And I kind of said, okay. I said, have you looked at my notes? I said, I haven't got COVID. I've had 3 of your tests. These are the tests. You're putting people on palliative care and locking them inside rooms and
Oh, your audio's gone, John.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just come back.
Yeah. And I said, these are the tests that you've put people on palliative care on the back of. And she said, we just want to be sure, want to save you because you'll die without them. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, tell me what the drugs are. I said, let's have a little look at what they do. And the first one was called tocilizumab. Tocilizumab. Now, you can put it in Google and get an autocorrect spelling. The second one was called baricitinib. Baricitinib. Now, they're both used to treat chronic arthritis. So I kind of looked at the first one. Wheeziness, tight chest, difficulty breathing. Look up the second one. Wheeziness, tight chest, difficulty swallowing, difficulty breathing, high blood pressure, drowsiness, nausea. All the things that are going to finish you off if you're a respiratory patient. So I kind of said to her, why would you offer me this? Well, you'll die without them. I said, well, then I'll die. I said, because I'm not having them. I said, because why would I want something that makes it harder to breathe? And she couldn't even look at me. I'm only doing what I'm told. Yeah, and scurried away. And it became very apparent then that what the British intelligence officer had told me was very true. So what they wanted was the death of because I was gaining traction there. People were listening to what I had to say. And they wanted the prominent anti-vaxxer to die from COVID. That's it. So I discharged myself. And the moment I told them that, the shit hit the fan. They were, you can't go anywhere and this, that, and the other. And they called security on me. Saying they would have me arrested if I left the ward because by then I could shuffle about a bit because I hadn't had their poisons and they weren't expecting me not to take them and they weren't expecting me to know what they were doing. But because I'd had the heads off this this comms officer, this intelligence officer, I knew. So
Just a question on that comms officer, because when you said you got this call out of the blue, I
yeah.
thought I thought he was going to be like sort of gunning for you, but what
No,
you're,
no, no, no. He was a guy. They know. There's good people working in British intelligence who know, but they're on a good number, and they're not all wicked and evil.
well,
And
I
as I
know,
said,
yeah, I just didn't realize that he actually
yeah, yeah, yeah,
gave you
yeah,
the heads
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Right.
That's how I had the heads up. And when I became ill, and they tested me, I knew I never had COVID.
No,
I knew I never had COVID.
it doesn't
But
bloody.
when they said to me, "Are we going to put you on a COVID ward just to be sure?" I knew then. I knew because I'm not stupid. Most people are stupid and they would panic. And if they're told by a consultant you're going to die without it, they'll trust that consultant. And then they go on to die. Then they put them down as a COVID death. The hospital get thousands of pounds for the remdesivir they've given you. They get thousands of pounds because COVID's done on the death certificate. They get thousands of pounds for putting you on a ventilator. Why would you monetize a pandemic unless that's what you wanted?
Yeah.
So I've since found out that earlier on, I said in the chat that we're having, when I was picking up these people, I was told had COVID. The body bag was half full of fluid. Now, I worked for the coroner for 7 of the 10 years that I was on the co-op. So I used to pick people up all the time in body bags, coroners jobs, sometimes out the road in pieces, usually from the coroners to a funeral directors, and I've never seen so much fluid in a body bag. I'm talking about halfway up the body full of fluid, like edema. And I remember thinking at the time, early on, fucking hell, what's doing that? And what is COVID doing that? And it wasn't COVID at all. It's the remdesivir. So the way it works is remdesivir destroys the kidneys. So then your body cannot process fluid. And you fill up and up and up and up and up, and it compresses your lungs and you drown. And there's your respiratory illness.
Wow.
And when I was getting these people, I was dressing them for people, and I was pulling them out the body bag when no one else would do it. And I was doing it. I was having to be really careful because you only have to touch their arm. And I can still see it now where you press gently on their arm, you leave indents because they were so bursting with fluid where the kidneys had failed from the remdesivir. And these people know this. And they were still, to give you an idea, the hospitals buy drugs from Big Pharma. And they were told if they took remdesivir, they would get a discount on all the other drugs. So, of course, they took the remdesivir.
Wow.
That's what happened. Yeah, and it was incentivized to use it. Why would you need to incentivize something? Because I can tell you as an engineer, if I did a certain operation to a machine and that machine broke down and failed in front of me, how many times would I do it before I think, actually, perhaps this is the wrong thing to do?
Yeah.
The same thing with remdesivir entirely. It's like putting sugar in a petrol tank. It destroys people. It destroys people. To give you an idea, I spoke at a thing that Rainer Formic, the German lawyer, was doing.
Yeah.
He was, we were asked to speak. I was given a 3-hour time slot, and inevitably, I've never been particularly lucky, but it was late at night, and I got this 3-hour time slot. I don't know, from 11 till I don't know 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. Inevitably, I spoke last. But they said you're on last, and I was like, well, I'm here now. I'll listen to what's said. And the guy that spoke before me was an expert on remdesivir. Okay, and and then the second one was a PCR test. But the first guy, I remember listening to him, and Anthony Fauci took remdesivir and went into Africa with it.
Yeah.
Now, they PCR tested African babies for Ebola. They were asymptomatic. They didn't have anything wrong with them physically. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
But they PCR tested them. And when he got a positive test, he filled that baby full of remdesivir, the antiviral. And 53% of the babies died from multiple organ failure. Healthy babies, but life is cheap in Africa.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
the poor Africans have been tested on by everything, haven't
oh,
they?
of course they have. And that is why the Africans won't take the vaccines. You won't
Exactly.
get Africans taking the vaccines. I look after Africans here, wonderful Ghanaian people. They come to me, and cancer is another one, right? So the cancers that I'm seeing now are 12-week, 16-week cancers. Cancer used to be a story where, and I get to know people pretty well because it's me from the first phone call. I arrange with the family. It's me directing them on the day. So there's continuity, and you get to know that family, which is the way I think it should be. I think all funeral directors should assign people to families that go through the entire journey with them, but there's 2 production line now. They're more bothered about funeral numbers than they are the quality of service, is the reality.
Yeah.
I'm more into funeral numbers, into quality rather than funeral numbers.
Yeah.
For example, I'll only ever do one funeral a day because I don't like rushing people. That's unheard of. Nobody else would do that. They'll go like, "Oh, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon," because they want to do more than one. I don't. I let a family pick the time, and it's usually dinner time because that's what suits everyone.
Yeah.
Um, I've lost my train of thought,
We're talking
but
about Africans and
yeah. So the Africans. Thank you. So the Africans, cancer. So cancer. When people used to come to me with cancer, they would have a cancer story, and it would be a 2 year, 5 year, sometimes a 10 year story.
yeah.
And they'd be really forthcoming, but it would always say the same thing. Mum had a lump. Mum went in and they chopped her about radical surgery, cut all her breasts off, and she was really poorly. Then they burnt her with radiation, and she was really poorly. Then they poisoned her with chemo, and she nearly died. But she was just doing well. She was still hanging in there, and then she caught a cold, and that was it. And that's not medicine. That's ritual sacrifice and mutilation on the way.
Yeah.
There's no medicine in there, I kind of, when you put it to these Africans that come in, so how many people have you lost from cancer? What is cancer? They've never heard of it because they come over here from Africa. They have a rural diet there. They don't have all the crap in the food that we have here and in the water. They're drinking and eating natural, more rural and more natural produce. So they don't. It's only when they move into Europe and then they will get bowel cancer, or 1 in 4. That's when they've heard of cancer. But the people from Ghana, they have no idea what is cancer. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it tells a story, doesn't it?
Of
For
course.
all the billions, how many billions do you think Ghana has thrown at cancer treatment?
Not a lot.
Not a lot at all. In fact, the mindset there. So I had an African lady in, and during the funeral arrangements, I would say to them, I'm going to do this, we're going to do that, and the music and the photos, and would you like a donation box? And she's like, "What is a donation box?" And I said, "Well, it's where we get." She said, "You people are stupid." She said, "You keep giving. As long as you keep giving, they will keep taking it. We do
Yeah.
not give money to strangers because the mindset is totally different. They see through the crap here. And you look at all the charities over here. They've got execs at the top creaming it all off. None of it reaches the ground level where it's supposed to go, or where they tell you it's going to go.
No.
And people like the RNLI who are picking all these young lads up in rubber boats. I would never put a donation box out as long as I'm a funeral director for the RNLI. Not why they're betraying us by bringing all these young lads in. No,
Well, I hadn't even thought about that because that's close to my
that's
sister.
what's facilitating it. That's what,
Yeah. I
yeah,
hadn't even thought. I hadn't even thought because obviously they do a lot of good in terms of picking people up,
yeah.
but
Of course they do.
I hadn't realised that.
They're
Yeah.
using them. Yeah, I would never put another penny out ever,
Wow.
never.
So after that big meeting and everything, and
Mm.
you nearly could have died if you didn't have your wits about you, and
Yeah,
luckily
of course.
you got out of hospital.
Whatever it was they give me, it weren't quite enough. If they'd have sedated me straight away, I wouldn't be here because
Really?
they could have finished me. Yeah, if they'd have morphine me or midazolam me, and they were trying, I just told them, no, I don't want it. Why would you give morphine to a respiratory patient? It just makes it harder to breathe. It's lunacy. It's murder.
Wow. So you got out and you obviously got better. And you weren't scared off at that point, clearly.
No, no, no. It made me more determined because the reality is we're all going to die. You, me, every one of your viewers, my cat, my dog, everyone. We'll all have our season. I've had 2/3 of my life, and it's been a really good life. I've loved. I've had friends. I was a popular lad at school. I can't say anything bad. I had a good upbringing. Um, so I throw it all on the bonfire to save other people. I don't care. Why is your family any less important than mine?
Mm.
It isn't, is the reality. We're all equals under the eyes of God. So why would I not say anything when I see a terrible danger? If they want to come and kill me for warning people about a deadly poison that's killing people, let them come and do it.
Did I hear right? I was talking to a friend the other day. Did you get a call from RFK?
Yes, I spoke to him for a couple of hours.
Did you? When was
Yeah.
that?
Oh, 2 years ago.
And
He
so,
knows all about the vaccines. He knows everything about the vaccines. He knows. My impression on RFK is he's a good guy. The reality is, though, we never know who's good and who isn't. I'd be surprised if Trump gets in and RFK is allowed free reign to tackle. I've got great hope And I think being an engineer, there's positive, there's negative, there's dark, there's light, there's up and down, back and front, heads and tails. There are opposites of all things. And I've learned there's a great evil running the show on this earth at the moment. And so where there is a great evil, there must be a force for good. Who is that? Is that God? Is it us? Is it the moral compass in us? What is it? I don't know. But I like to think he's a force for good. The reality is, I really don't know. I'm not privileged to that information. I'm not privy to it. You can
Did he?
only I kind of weigh up a guy based on his actions, and he's saying all the right things. But unfortunately, Trump's taken on some other people who are clearly not good people. So I'm not sure what way it's going to go. To be honest, I like the thought of them all being held accountable and seeing another Nuremberg. Will that happen? I really don't know, but I will try my best.
Yeah. So why did he call you, and did he just call you out of the blue? What happened?
He wanted to know from a funeral director who was dying, what I was finding, what I was seeing. And I told him, and he knew. He knew. He's a really clever guy. And in fact, RFK, I've got time for him. I think he's all right. Is he all right? I really don't know. Is he one of the cabal? I really don't know. But he came across as quite a nice guy. He's a very difficult guy to understand because he's got that speech impediment. And I've
Yeah.
listened to him speak recently, and he's obviously had a lot of vocal coaching and therapy for whatever the condition is. I was told, I can't remember it. Forgive me, RFK. But he was quite difficult to understand. And because I'm a guy that's quite polite and I respect people, I was very conscious of not saying I'm sorry, because
Yeah.
it kind
Yeah.
of make him feel worse.
Yeah.
He's a very clever guy. We had a chat. He knows what these vaccines are doing, and he's been very vocal about it. Now, my disappointment is that Trump hasn't been very vocal about it. Does he plan to when he's in office? Is there some big Q thing going to happen? Is it all what bullshit? I really don't know. Are there white hats? Are there not? I don't know. And I can tell you now, these people wouldn't get in touch with me because I'm listened to constantly. They watch me constantly. They check my emails. I've heard them on the phone when I'm on the phone to clients. Listen, at the control room, you can hear the call signs. Juliet Ross, and I kind of say, guys, I'm on the phone to a client. Go and you can hear the panic and now they're Muppets. They're Muppets.
Wow.
And I can't believe that they would go along with it, destroy their own communities as well. Stupid, utter stupidity. There is no seat on the ark for them. They're tools used to fulfill a purpose. And then they're loose ends and witnesses, aren't they? So they will all go on the same cattle trucks we go on if we let them do it.
Yeah. So was there any sort of, you had that call with RFK? Was there any like, oh, John, I'd like to stay in touch or anything like that? Or
No, I know where he is. I can reach out to him. So they run, I wouldn't say it's a secret, but a group of people. It's called Base Camp, and there are a number of people that they consider worthy of being part of that, and we feed into that. So that's where evidence is gathered. You'll be aware that most of these people, any good agency is only as good as the people in it. And that's the same as any business. These people that walk around like they're gods, they're not gods. They're only as good as the people they have under them and their relationship with those people.
yeah,
If you want to get the best out of someone, treat people the way you would want to be treated because they're mirrors. If you look into a mirror, what do you get? You
yeah,
get what you put in, don't you? So that's the kind of basis and mindset that Robert has. And he has a very good intelligence network, and I have access to that. I don't input much on it. I'll read bits. I don't need to be told. I'm putting these people in comments. He knows where I am. If he wants to speak to me, I would gladly make time for him because I consider him a really good guy. Is he a good guy? I really don't know, but that's the way I weigh him up. He seems a good guy, and he's saying the right things, isn't he?
he is saying the right things, and I know what you're saying. It's like, is Trump good? Is he bad? Is
We
like
really don't know. I'd
there's
like
so
to
much
see him
discreditation.
openly tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about these vaccines. And my disappointment is this: there will be people that queue up to take these vaccines today, and they will die as a result of that vaccine. If he spoke up now, he has such a massive presence and stage presence. People would listen, and they wouldn't go for those vaccines. He could save lives today. There would be children and babies and mothers that will die today because they haven't spoken out openly. And that, to me, is not the actions of a good guy. Not only would you save these people, but they would then rally behind you. So I kind of wonder, is there a plan to do that? Isn't there? I don't know. I don't know. I kind of, it's very interesting. There's a convention against the use of biological weapons, an international convention. These are bioweapons. The only country that wouldn't sign the convention was Israel, and he's very pro-Israel. You can read into that what you will. The reality is, I'm just a funeral director. I'm a very small fish. There's nothing that I can do that I haven't done.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I would do it. If somebody said, if you do this, you can save the world, I'd throw myself under the bus. I wouldn't even blink.
Yeah, I suppose that's a big bone of contention. I think none of us know, but in my opinion, I think there's a lot of moving parts, and it's all it's being staged, and so much is done then,
There's
and
good and
then
bad in everyone. I can tell you, there's good and bad in everyone. I've spoke to many people, many members of the Jewish community that have reached out to me, community leaders and rabbis who are horrified with Israel,
mm,
and that's why they live in Europe. So there is good and bad in everyone. I'm British. Boris Johnson is British. Matt Hancock is British. We're not all the same people.
no, you're English, John.
Oh yeah, well, there's good and bad. Do you know what? You say that, but if somebody landed on Scottish shores, I'd be up there like a rocket to fight them
Oh
off.
yeah, yeah,
I consider
yeah,
myself British. I am English, but I'm British as well, and I've got a lot of time. In fact, the further north I go, the better laugh they are. Sometimes, they're good people, aren't they?
I'm tongue in cheek. It's more about we live in
Oh, of course.
the
No,
realm
of
of
course.
England. Do you
I
know what I
get
mean?
you, and people should be proud of what we are and where we're from. But unfortunately, they've kind of weaponized that, haven't they?
Yeah,
It's if you fly your own flag, it's a hate crime and you're a racist now.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's all about inversion, isn't it? It's men going into women's toilets now because they say they're women. Men beating up women in the ring. Obese, fat transgenders doing the Last Supper for the Olympics. The dancers on the sea of red blood simulating sudden death vaccine victims. It's there. It's in front of people. They're rubbing, but people, and I think the trouble is people are, for the most part, fundamentally good. You can be people of all walks in life, whether they're quiet, loud, stupid, reserved. They're fundamentally good people, and they've played on that because the reality is so outrageous. People are not ready to accept the truth if it's told to them. And I noticed this. I worked on the door for a long time. 7 years I did on the door, and where you get a fight there people react differently to it. Some people will stand and fight, other people will freeze, some people will run away. And COVID is very similar. It's shown me similar traits where some people they probably know in their hearts that what I'm saying is right, but they no, it can't be. No, they can't accept it. The reality, and the reality is for most people, if they've had an active ingredient, they are going to die. And I was told they can only manage the symptoms. There is no cure because you're genetically reprogrammed.
Well, there's a lot of detoxing stuff that you can
There
take.
is, there is, but I want to be realistic with people. You're fighting the symptoms. You can't genetically reprogram yourself. I would urge you certainly to look at those detox protocols. And there are snippets of wisdom, such as you are what you eat. That's so true. So, if you're given a detox program and it's black seed oil and NAC and nattokinase and bromelain and all of the other bits, get them down you by all means. Can you genetically reprogram your body to stop making spike proteins? No, is the reality. Not that we're aware of yet, but I can tell you there are an army of good people working on exactly that. Will they be successful? I really don't know. I'm an undertaker. But I am hopeful because I think wherever they can do damage, that damage can be repaired. It's just finding the mechanisms. And I suspect that when arrests are made, that cure will quickly come to pass. And I believe the future medicine, personally, I think the future medicine will evolve not around chemicals, it'll be frequencies.
Yeah,
I genuinely believe that I can
yeah,
see that, yeah, coming to pass. These med beds that recalibrate the body with frequency. I think that's because we all resonate at a certain frequency.
yeah.
Healthy tissue does.
Well,
It's
we've already got, I don't know if you've seen the energy enhancement centres that are popping up around the UK and around the world. A friend of mine actually invested heavily in the biggest one in Europe, which is in
mm,
County Donegal,
mm,
in Ireland. And I've been into one myself. It's quite a smaller one down in Bedfordshire. And that's all, it's scalar frequency. And I've
Mm.
had a previous guest on that's talked all about scalar, and he's created his own. He's an inventor, and all of that. So I absolutely agree. So when you were talking about the spike proteins and all of that, there is still a massive, and you've got to believe it, that you can reset your whole body through the frequency stuff and through the energy work, but the mind has to believe it, because if the
Yeah,
mind
of course.
doesn't
I
believe it,
think certainly mind over matter, and tomorrow's what seemed like witchcraft today is tomorrow's technology, isn't it? So
yeah,
I don't doubt where every damage can be done as an engineer, whatever's damaged can be repaired. Is just knowing how to do that
how to do
and
it.
knowing how to do it quickly enough before it kills the host.
Yeah,
Is the thing.
yeah,
Another thing I'm hearing promising things about is something called methylene blue.
yeah. I've
But
got some of
again,
that.
there's a
Yeah,
guy called Harry that I've been liaising with who's talking about that, and he's been showing me some evidence and bits and bobs, and I really don't know. I guess I haven't had to look in too deeply because I haven't been vaccinated
yeah,
or poisoned, for want of a
yeah.
better word. It's so I've not had to look, and my wife is not had one, and my son is never having any.
Never going to have any.
Not while I got breath in me, no.
No. So we've been on just over an hour. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon yet that's quite big that you'd like to share? And also, I'd like to ask if there's anything coming up for you, in terms of, I don't know where things are. Are you just carrying on with your day job, and every so often somebody might get in touch with you, or are you actively still trying, other than your own videos and stuff? Um,
It's a difficult thing, isn't it? When you think about what my life has been like, I'm trying to run a busy funeral home. I'm trying to be a dad and a husband, and that's been incredibly difficult, and save the world as well. I'm only one person. I'm not a filmmaker, so I tend to kind of speak to whoever wants to speak to me. I'm not selling a book. There's no video. I'm not, people say, oh, you're a grifter. I challenge anyone. Show me any evidence to support me taking a penny outside of my funeral home for speaking to people. And it saddens me because I get invited to speak to places and they say, oh, we pay expenses in a speaker's fee. Why would I want to take money off someone for warning people about a deadly threat? I don't consider that I should be paid for that. And I'm fortunate enough that I can pay for my own petrol to get somewhere and back. I always come back the same night because I'm on call for a family if they lose a loved one or whatever. I just, yeah, why would I want to get paid? I suppose it's different if you're running podcasts or that's what you do for a living. But certainly for me at this moment, until they destroy my business, which is usually they target you and do you financially, don't they? If they did that, then I would perhaps have to think again and write a book or something if that's what's going to keep food on the table. But until that time, I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't consider it feels like blood money, don't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
I always fancied being like a singer or a good rugby player or a footballer or something. That's a different kind of, but I don't want to be famous for this. There's nothing good about this, nothing good about it. And, it's not celebrity that I'm after um, at all.
no, no. So you're just going to keep doing what you do, basically.
Yeah, I keep doing what I do. And I mean, now I think most people kind of know that these jabs are really bad. If I pick up a significant piece of intel, of course I would share it. I mean, somebody said to me, oh, what about if they rung up and threatened your family? Good question. What would you do? I would tell everyone so that when they then done it, it would turn it against them. That's what you've got to do. And inevitably talking keeps you safe. So I'll keep talking as long as people want to hear what I have to say. I'll tell them,
Yeah,
other than that, um, I'm just an undertaker. There's nothing special about me. I just trying to keep my head above water, same as everyone else, and get rid of my mortgage and not rack up any debt and try and treat people how I want to be treated. And to be honest, that's a good formula. And I think the older you get, the more you realise it's better to give than to receive.
mm, yeah, absolutely. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. If people do want to reach out to you, what's the best?
Just on the funeral home, yeah. Just if you type into your browser MKFFS, which is Milton Keynes Family Funeral Services, but if you type MKFFS in the toolbar, you'll find me, and you
Yeah.
can bell me anytime. What I would say is, if you haven't lost someone, ring me in office hours, because otherwise I get drunks ringing me up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a chat, and yeah, it does
Gosh,
happen, yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I'll gladly talk to you. And if I'm busy with the family, I'd be straight. I'd be honest, and say ring back in an hour, or and people do that, and it's really nice and really upsetting. And I've spoke to doctors, nurses, politicians, police, I've had 4 peers get in touch with me. I never thought, why am I, I've got lords ringing me up. That's not normal, is it? It's not a position I ever thought I'd be in. But here you
Thoughts.
are. Yeah, lords, yeah, peers
Yeah.
ringing me up, asking me what I can tell them, what do I know, what they think as well. They are convinced it's a communist coup. It's a globalist communist coup. So that's who they think it is. And I think you can see it was very telling. The fact that in Downing Street they pulled Thatcher's portrait down and put one up of Lenin kind of tells you what you need to know.
I knew
Yeah,
Thatcher
most people
came.
don't even know.
No, I knew Thatcher came down, but I didn't know Lenin went up.
Yeah,
So
Lenin's up. Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know. Well, I fully agree. So I like to finish these conversations with anything you feel called to share before we finish.
All I would say is just network with each other. Stay positive because although unfortunately I think it's going to get a lot darker before we get to the light, we will get to the light. And I've always felt convinced that we will win. Um, will I be about to see it? I really don't know. But if I'm not here physically, I can tell you I will be here spiritually and I would rally people from the other side. I'm not frightened of death. Death's not the end, it's the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's a journey that we're all going to take. I'm more frightened of living badly than I am of dying. So yeah, so just stay positive. They're never going to win. But what you're going to see is these people are in their death throes now, so they're going to thrash about and they're going to be more and more unreasonable and nasty. And the reason for that is they're desperate for civil unrest. So we can win this without a bullet fired, just by consciousness. And I think I've always felt that the key to beating them here in the UK would be a 5 million march down the M1 to Westminster. 5 million souls. And I think when we get them kind of numbers, there's nothing they could do. There's nothing they could do. And they would have to all step down. And I think that's going to be the way forward. I want to see a 5 million march, and I'd lead from the front.
That is so weird because I've always said we all need to go down the M1 with our pitchforks, and you just
Yeah, I think you could do it without a shot fired. We're clever enough now to do it. And let them be brutal because it would force their hand. Everyone's got a mobile phone now, and it's their own weapons being used against them. They issued these really to track us and trace us and monitor us, and we're actually using them against them. So let them do their worst. I kind of, in a way, I celebrate every new insane thing that idiots like Starmer do and he's got no power. He only does what he's told to do from upstairs, and he's a village idiot. He's widely regarded politically as a village idiot because only a village idiot would take that on.
yeah.
So let him do his worst because it's a numbers game, and every time they do another stupid thing, the numbers come flocking in, don't they? And the moment we get enough numbers, they're finished.
Did you sign the petition?
Of course. Yeah, and I've shared it as well. Will it make any difference? I don't think so. But it shows the depth of public feeling, doesn't it? And it reminds us all that we're not alone. And I can tell you, you're not alone. I take 30 phone calls every day from people just like us.
Yeah.
Every day, different people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing so honestly and candidly. I knew you would. Your passion just spills over
Oh, I
in.
love people. I love people I would never meet. I love kids that I would never meet.
Yeah.
They're my kids as well.
Yeah. Bless you. Well, thank you. And I know the viewers are going to love this. Thank you so
Good.
much.
God bless. Bump me a link and I'll share it widely and get it out there. And, if we can benefit you on the podcast as well, it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks,
All
John.
right, Mel. It was lovely to meet you.